They say Donald lacks the foreign policy experience to be president. But in fairness, he has spent years meeting with leaders from around the world. Miss Sweden, Miss Argentina, Miss Azerbaijan.
All right, President Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last night poking a little fun there at the Republican frontrunner's credentials to be commander-in-chief in foreign policy. Earlier this week, Trump unveiled his foreign policy vision, a dramatic overhaul of the nation's role in the world.
My foreign policy will always put the interests of the American people and American security above all else. America first will be the major and overriding theme of my administration.
Forbes opinion editor Avik Roy, also former advisor to the presidential campaigns of Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Marco Rubio. Avik, thank you for being here. What is your thought on what Donald Trump is saying? America first.
Well, it's consistent with the theme of his domestic policy, right? His domestic policy has been all about nationalism. It's about closing our borders to immigrants, closing our borders in terms of free trade. He's been a real skeptic of American engagement economically with the world. And an America First foreign policy in that sense is of a piece with that. It's consistent with that nationalist political philosophy.
It has been said by those leaders of other countries, especially in the EU, that the United States does need to do more. But at the same time, other countries like China and India should also step up when we talk about the issues of foreign policy. As Donald Trump is saying America first, that could portend a little bit of a step back for the United States. And that is in contradiction to the hope that the United States might do more.
Yeah, you know, and this is one of those debates we've been having in America for actually a very long time, right? I mean, if you go back to the debate before World War II between the isolationists and FDR who wanted to get involved in World War II, it was exactly the same debate. Is it a better world? Is America's interests advance if America's more involved or less involved? History suggests that in a multipolar world where a lot of other countries have more power and more power is distributed, there's more war, there's more conflict. This period of American hegemony, even though it's required a lot from the United States, has actually been more beneficial to world stability and also to American interests.
A defining core in the last decade, as you know so well here, Avik, is the issue of terrorism. And Donald Trump stoking some controversy regarding that. But in addition to that, he was also criticized for not offering enough detail on issues related to ISIS. Let's take a listen to this first, and I'll get to your reaction.
And then there's ISIS. I have a simple message for them. Their days are numbered. I won't tell them where, and I won't tell them how. We must, as a nation, be more unpredictable.
More unpredictable. Many would say, well, he'd be the perfect person for that, Donald Trump. What is your reaction to the kind of impacts that these threats of unpredictability have on global stability and in his stance and his strategy that he laid out in that one line?
Listen, I mean, when it comes to very precise military tactics, of course there are times when you want to be unpredictable. But the president should actually be fairly predictable in terms of his worldview, in terms of the way he approaches the world, in terms of when he says something, it's actually going to happen. And that's been a challenge with this administration. For example, the famous Syria red line that the president said, if Bashar Assad is using chemical weapons against his people, we're going to go in, and then he hemmed and hawed. That's the kind of thing that actually has enhanced the appeal of Donald Trump. But there is a middle ground between those two points of view.
So the question has been, for those who are watching this campaign very closely when it comes to foreign policy, are what he is about to say. Because Trump is promising to do a series of policy speeches. And from what you've seen so far here, Avik, do you think that he is showing a stronger grasp of these issues?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit better, and you will see actually the pundit reaction to the foreign policy speech was in large part reasonably positive. I mean, there were criticisms, as you said, about the details, but relative to his other policy forays, his foreign policy speech, it's a low bar perhaps, grading on a curve, but he has done a little better with that speech than others.
Versus Hillary Clinton?
Well, not versus Hillary Clinton, but versus his other speeches on other topics like health care and domestic policy and things like that. So again, in a general election against Hillary, Hillary's clearly going to have the upper hand in terms of policy knowledge and detail and thoughtfulness. That's always been the case, and Trump is banking on his tone, his attitude, his persona, trumping that more detailed policy approach.
Yes or no, do you think this will actually matter in this election, the general election?
Well, again, I think most voters, when it comes to foreign policy, don't really care about it that much unless they really see it affecting them directly. With terrorism, sometimes that's true, but generally speaking, unless we're in a Cold War or it's right after 9/11, the voters really want your economic plan. They want to know what you're going to do for them in domestic policy. So this is more about appearing presidential, having that gravitas, having that heft, and we'll see whether Trump has reached that threshold.
Avik Roy, thank you for spending your time with us on this Sunday.
My pleasure.
And that's all for me this hour. Thanks for joining us. I'll be back with you at noon Eastern Time. Joy Reid takes over from here. Have a great Sunday and stick around.